Welcome at the CineLink Talks at Sarajevo International Film Festival 2021. My name is Martichka Bozhilova. I'm a film producer from AgitProp based in Sofia, Bulgaria. And also I'm co-heading together with Rada Sesic a documentary Ravka Boutique that is part of CineLink Sarajevo already for many years, 11 years if I have to be correct. And we have the honor to produce and organize this talk today. I'm really honored to present at your attention Alexander Nanau, Romanian film director and producer, whose film Collective was 2 times Oscar nominated and winner at EFA at this year. Alex, hello. Very nice to having you. Alex, we know each other for quite some time already.
Yes.
Since the time you've been doing the Life According to IMB.
Yeah, the world according to IMB, yeah.
Exactly. And then you did Toto and his sister, an amazing film that was also part of documentary Ravka Boutique. And then we had the chance to see Collective. Here we have an audience that is part of industry of CineLink, and of course we would be really happy to hear from you about your path, how everything happened from beginning of your career as film director, independent film director, up to Collective. My first question, and of course, I really hope this can be as a conversation, and I would like to welcome the audience to put their questions in the chat or in the Q&A session. They will be directed to us in the chat so we can see and we can tackle them either straight away if this is relevant, or we will have the last 15 minutes for answering your questions. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat. So Alex, maybe you've heard this question before, but it would be really nice if we can start from the time you consciously decided to come back to Romania, because you were based in Germany before and become an independent filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us about this period?
Yeah, I mean, there was a period in different steps. So I think the first time I came to Romania was while I was still studying at the film school in Berlin. And I did not visit Romania in many years. And I was surprised to read more and more about Romania because it was going to enter the European Union, which for me was the image I had the last time in the 90s when I was in Romania seemed really a very strange thing, that it would be a country that would be ready to enter the European Union. And so I came to Romania out of curiosity. And discovered really, a country and a society that had a lot of energy, and everything felt like there's a new beginning, and everybody was looking forward to joining the European Union. And so I got more or less interested in different themes and projects. And it took many years until I decided basically to move to Romania. First, I did the two films when I was still living in between the countries. I would shoot the films in Romania, but would still be most of the time in Germany and work there on post-production, everything. And then basically, I think it was 2015, end of 2015, when I decided to really move also my base to Romania. And it was at the same time as the collective fire happened, and we also started to dig deeper into the theme and started the project.
And a little bit again, going back with your first great success, the Life According to INB that won Emmy Prize, which is absolutely unbelievable for a filmmaker from our region. I think this is the first time that this is happening. Did you consciously decide to go back to Romania to search for subjects, or this was something that from you based in Germany were somehow researching? How it happened that you decided to do this film?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it has a lot to do with the way I function as a human being and also as a filmmaker. Basically, the themes that I'm looking for, and most of all, the decision to do documentary that came in film school was based on the fact that I had the feeling that before I start doing fiction films, I really want to have a broader life experience, let's say, and documentary filmmaking seemed like the right way of, keeping to make films and getting to know the world better and life better. The other version of it would have been to abandon everything and just, take a backpack and travel the world. But I found that the observational documentary filmmaking is really a great way of experiencing life and the world and really analyzing it, and maybe also let's say for somebody who is interested in the arts, most of the time you're more interiorized than a very exteriorized person, and watching the world through a lens felt in a way the right way for me. And so I started in Germany, where I did a film on theater, which was also an observation documentary on the work of a theater director on the play Per Kind at the Berliner Ensemble. And so from there, basically the step to Romania was just my curiosity about the Romanian society. And I stumbled over this character very shortly after somebody discovered him, a homeless man that had really artwork that he produced in the 70s and 80s in Romania when he had no access to pop art, but apparently it was, as good as pop art, and he produced it in parallel with the Western society, which he had no access to. But it was more than that. It was really a very typical story of, huge talent that was basically crushed in the communist society, be it by the violence in the family, and everything that came with it. He was a man that basically fled his home when he was a child. And I think it was more, he reminded me of my grandfather, who was also a very talented man, who was the person in my life that, starting with when he would read stories to me, he would draw and paint all the characters. And then he was the person who would go with me to the cinema 2 or 3 times a week. So he was for me basically let's say the main person in my life that introduced me to stories and storytelling and to creativity in a way. And he reminded me of my grandfather, and that was also a way for me to discover what it meant for a talent like my grandfather to grow up in such a repressive society. And that was also how I found the next film. Somebody approached me if I would be interested in doing something on Roma, and I rejected it first because I thought I had nothing to do with it. And it was, again, I accepted to do some research, and I discovered basically traveling the country and different Roma communities. I discovered, let's say, the way I was attracted to the kids' life in such communities and what it means basically to be born in such a situation. And for sure, it also reminded me of the fact that I grew up next to this kind of childhoods in Romania. And the big question was for me, like, who you know, what basically influences the way your life will be, and what are the things that make us who we are. And for me, it was a very strong question about who would I be if I would be born on that side of society, you know, because the kids I met were completely aware of the fact that they are as good or as talented or as strong as the kids that had, you know, all the possibilities in the beginning. And that's how I basically met Toto and decided to take a look at the life of kids that basically start with no chance. And you know what it means in such an environment to stay yourself and to you know, not to abandon yourself, let's say, to what the society around you makes out of you. So all the projects I boarded are basically things that I think that basically came to me like, while I was curious about life. And then I had a strong trigger where I felt, oh, this, you know, if I would look at this through a camera lens, there could be really a strong story. That could really be a story that would help me to understand more about life. So it was always a selfish decision about how can I gain more life experience.
Yeah, you great that you mentioned your next success, Toto and his sisters that were really traveling the world. And it was actually your second collaboration with HBO.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you whether consciously you decided also to produce your films, and how this meeting happened with HBO, which actually became your traditional partners throughout your way to the collective.
Oh, basically, I think with the world according to IMB, it happened that they were looking for projects in Romania for sure. The team that was then at HBO Romania, and I was already in the editing stage. So basically, they came on board while we were editing and financed the money we were lacking, basically. And that went then on with the incoming of Hanka Kastelitsova. And she was basically, HBO didn't want to board Toto, the team that was back then at HBO. And luckily, Hanka came basically to HBO Europe. And if you remember, you connected me to Hanka. I asked you to establish a contact because the people that were back then there didn't, you know, were not interested in Toto. I thought maybe if there's a new person, she would be interested. And she came to the editing room in Romania, and we screened for her the edit we have done for CineLink for Sarajevo, and then, you know, we watched that 45 minutes, and then at the end she said, it's great, we'll do it together. And it became the first project Hanka did basically with for HBO Europe.
Wow, this is really amazing match and great support from my point of view from the outside. But how to go back to my previous question, you also produce your films, right?
Yes.
Is it your conscious decision to do so, and how and why you decided so?
I think this happened basically because the way I work and the way I learned to work, I started already in film school. The first film I did was basically also an independently produced film, because we were not allowed to do a long film in the first 2 years. And I did it, and then I would go during night shifts in the film school to edit it, and so I learned everything by myself, and also production. For me, one thing is very important in production, to know what my creative ground is, basically. And I really have to know that if there's a budget in place, that means we can be that creative. You know, there's a certain part of the budget that we know we will burn on creativity. So I liked to be, let's say, in control, but in both ways. I mean, in control of the fact that if I know there is a budget, I know that whatever we invest will make the film better. And for sure, at the same time, it's also good that you know, if you go over budget, you will suffer. You know, you don't put other people into danger, let's say. And it's also a way of how I build up the project. So basically, I start them, I finance them myself, and only after a while, let's say after 1 or 2 months of shooting, for sure, also after the development phase, I would edit and I would try to see, okay, can I guarantee that there's a strong film in it? Are the characters delivering? Is there the possibility to develop a story further? And only then I go out and really, you know, am courageous enough to say, okay, whatever you invest, you know, I can assure you that there will be a good film. And so it's both sides, you know, being in control of my, you know, stretching my creative possibilities as far as I can, but at the same time also being responsible.
Yeah, actually, I was having the chance to know a little bit more about your creative method, but you really prefer to have all the possibilities to be closer to your characters. How many shooting days you would envisage for that? In each of these films, how much time you prefer to spend with your characters, with the camera, to gain trust, because you really insist on that. Also, in the post-production, the editing process, from my observation, you really insist to take your time in order to achieve the best possible.
Yes. Yeah, so basically in my head, for observational documentary filmmaking, I always have in my head that it is at least a period over 12 months, which we will use to shoot, which doesn't mean that you shoot all the time, but it means that it is for sure a period where I know that's the time I would give to myself to really see if a story develops. And so that's the minimum time I know we will have to invest in the shooting period. In that time, I would say the projects differ. Sometimes, I guess we had 120, other times 150 shooting days. But that also means that sometimes a shooting day lasts only 2 hours or 1 hour. Other times 18 hours. You know, it really depends on, you know, having the stamina to really follow your characters and wait for things to happen, or also, you know, spend time with the characters you follow, with the people you follow, to wait to see how tension builds up in their lives, and where you can step in with the camera without disturbing a live situation, or stepping in points where you can achieve authenticity in front of the camera. Which doesn't mean, I mean, that's a long discussion for sure, which doesn't mean that I say that it's the same life would evolve if you are or are not there with the camera. But I mean, there's a big difference between achieving to film authenticity or not. And that needs time sometimes, you know, that needs time, but not so much in the beginning, because many times people ask me, you know, how long do you spend time with your characters before filming them, or before they become natural in front of the camera. That's something that happens pretty fast, I would say. So I film really from the very beginning. There's mostly maybe one day, not more, where I meet characters and talk to them, and then I really have the camera with me. After which, basically, the time they start to become, let's say, more natural in front of the camera is not more than a couple of shooting days.
Yeah. And this is really important that your creative method is, of course, ensured by right financiers, right partners around you. And this has been, of course, Hanka Kastelitsova that you mentioned, but also Bianca Wana, your collaborator for your last two films. Do you is it enough to have this kind of support, or you are looking for more partners than that? How you process?
Oh, that's different. I mean, for Toto, for example, we had the financing was basically pre-sales that we did. There were some funds from I think the Soros Foundation. There was the Sundance Fund. We were Sundance supported and also did the Sundance Labs with Toto. Then we had Hanka, HBO Europe. So, you know, let's say a classic financing scheme. And then for Collective, for example, it was basically, it was me and Hanka. We together decided to make the project, and then we decided we will invest equally in development. And then I brought on also Bernard Michaud from Samsa Film from Luxembourg, who became the co-producer. So I pitched it to Bernard. Bernard had seen in Luxembourg Toto and his sisters and wanted to work with me since he had seen Toto and his sisters, and immediately boarded basically the project. And also contributed with development money. And so it was basically Hanka, Bernard, and me who took off with the project. And it was a classic financing in terms of, it was the first time that the Romanian Film Fund funded one of my projects. The other ones before were, the first one, I understand that the people that decide about the proposal said that who was interested in a homeless bum? Why should we show such pictures from Romania? And the second one is very clear. Why should we show gypsies from Romania? It's not a film that we should finance.
Yeah,
but
this sounds very, very familiar to me as well, because in our part of the world, we can very often see this kind of opinion from the official side. But luckily, we have HBO, we have this possibility that is really, really giving a chance to like not so comfortable projects to come to life. Actually, I remember slowly we can go to the Collective, of course, which is the most of interest for us and for the audience that is listening. I remember you pitching at ITFA in Amsterdam, this project, together with Hanka. And this was really, this was really the first maybe coming out in front of international panel. How was your thoughts at the time? Were you, and how was the response? Because of course, it might seem very local, very specific thing. At the same time, Romania, until that moment, was absolutely not familiar to the bigger audience. I mean, in a sense that you are showing this really, you might say at first sight, like current affair, political things. So how everything happened at the time, if you can remember?
Yeah. I mean, that was until the very end. That was basically the, let's say, the concern with this project, because when we started it, although Bernard and also Hanka were very confident it's a story that we have to tell and it will find its audience. There was always the concern, it's a local story, who's interested in, every country has some kind of fire, and who would, would the story that followed the journalistic story that implies a lot more things about society and truth and fake news and all these themes that we are now so familiar with. At that time, when we pitched it at ITVA, which was 2016, I guess, the concern was the same. And I remember that until the night before the pitching, I had no pitch. And we were sitting in the hotel lobby with Hanka and Bianca, and I said, give me 10 minutes. I just have to, I went aside and suddenly I had in my head the pitch, and the next morning we pitched. But we had a very good trailer. And that's what I always do. I try to have a trailer where anybody who sees these things, okay, there's already the whole story. You can see the story. And it was a really pleasant surprise because we understood in this big room, in the central pitch, which doesn't exist anymore, as I understand now. It's really like a huge room with so many people. And we could feel it, we could feel that people were totally into it and engaged. And then the response was huge, basically. So the response of people that got interested in. And one thing that happened there, for example, that was crucial also for this project is that we started discussing with Filipa Kowarski. And Filipa Kowarski from Cinefil became a team member, basically, from that moment on, and is responsible for a lot of the good things that happened with the film and its distribution once it came out.
That's really great. So this was like quite an outcome from the pitching in Amsterdam, and I can confirm that everybody was discussing after the pitch. Even at first moment, there is nobody that can expect whatever, because they really didn't know anything about Romania. That was at least my opinion, and it was really people chatting. We have to show Romania of today, something like that.
Yeah, I think it's very important, this kind of pitchings. I think it's really important for the making of a project, to have even because we were basically maybe in the first quarter of production or something like that, and I think it's very important to really test the grounds. Try to build a package, let's say, of trailer and pitching that is, several 10 minutes, let's say, and understand also for yourself as a filmmaker, does it work? Is the core there? Did I touch upon the core of the story I'm telling? Because, if the audience reacts to it, then you have something, okay, there's a center, I can start building around it. And I think that's something very important to do in very early in production.
Yeah, for sure. There is one question that I can ask you from the chat that is quite relevant at that moment. For Collective, when did you start shooting? Right away after the fire or later? Thank you, amazing documentary.
Thank you very much. I think we started to shoot around 1 month after the fire. I remember I started to shoot during the demonstrations, but more, testing a new camera, being very impressed by the number of people on the streets. And I was thinking, somebody should do a documentary about this. But at the same time, it seemed that so many things came together. It was a theme that was so wide and going in 1,000 directions, from politics to personal to healthcare. It was impossible for me to wrap my head around it. And only later, basically, when I met Hanka, I think we were in Berlin, and also a Romanian actress encouraged us, she said, like, oh, I think that's the most important theme now in Romania, which it was for sure. It was national tragedy. And that was the point where we decided, okay, let's try to do so. It's incredibly complicated. Who knows, what kind of film it has to be, but let's try to do something.
Yeah. Do you think there is also something to do with the fact that you've achieved already quite some acknowledgement as a filmmaker to take over this really risky subject in your hands and make a really creative and meaningful documentary film? Do you find any connection with that already experience that you have and trust among the financiers and the documentary film market as a whole?
I think that, yes, that's for sure. I mean, that came also, it was, let's say, my concern, would I be able to finance and sustain such a hard work, basically, that will last some time. The success of Toto and his sisters helped a lot. And it helped for sure that I was not in the position anymore where I would, run around and present myself to people and say like, okay, could you please take a look at my project? And it was I was suddenly in the other position where people came to me and said like, hey, we would like to be, part of your project. That helped for sure. That Toto helped, as I already said, for Bernard, the co-producer, to come on board very fast. And I think with the financing of the Romanian Film Center, it was the fact that we were already experienced in writing good treatments. And it's, it was a strong project basically. And sure, I mean, the let's say the experience that I gained, or also my team gained during the last films, helped a lot. Yeah.
It's really great that the film in the end is even stronger than the pitch and then everything intentional that we knew about it before. How happened the process? Did you start editing already during the shooting? How was the work with your characters? Because it's obvious that some characters joined later, or I mean, throughout your process, you probably changed and shifted a little bit the point of view in the film. Everything happened at once, or there were some breaks in between these decisions?
No, the thing is, with every project, most of all with observational, you basically don't know what kind of a film it will be. So you find, while you're doing it, you start to sense, or you try to sense, what kind of cinema will that be? How will it work? And for example, there were phases, because although I knew I don't want to do one of the, let's say, classic documentary forms about an incident in a society where you normally have, you film people in the streets, then you show interviews with smart people that say smart things about what's happening and explain things to you, and you try to bring drama into it by building a storyline along what people are telling you. And I knew I didn't want that. I knew I want to develop even further my observational approach that I thought I developed and learned about basically while I was doing Toto. But that said, it didn't mean that I was already sure it will work. So basically, even during the development time, we started doing interviews and started lighting them as if we would have to use them later in the film. So we have for sure hours and hours of interviews that were meant for documentation, for understanding different storylines, and also for testing the ground with different characters and how they would be on camera, and if they could be characters we could follow. So I think only after the press investigation took off and I had access and I could be there, I sensed, that could really be a film about journalism like we haven't seen it until now. And then I start basically, once I start to understand a bit about what kind of a film it could be, I really start to watch everything that has been done, with the world according to IMB. I think I've seen hundreds of films about art and artists to understand what I would do differently, what I like, what I don't like, and so forth, and what the different forms are in which you can package a story, let's say. And with this film, the same. And I remember when I realized, oh, this could really be a European film about journalism, I started to look for European films about journalism. I couldn't find them. There are no, there are journalists in European films, but we don't have in Europe the same culture of films based on journalism as, a co-founder of democratic society. We just don't, press was not really a focus of European cinema. With small exceptions, which were more about art, be it Antonioni or other people. And so once I was in the middle, in this vortex of journalism, investigation, and the fight with the authorities, and I understood, oh, this could really be this could really tell something about society. But at the same time, I felt that it's too one-layered, because it's something that happens because other people were victims of this system, or of politicians and doctors that were lying. And so how would you show that? And slowly I started to have this image of a film that really manages to show so different angles. But the question is, how do you stay, as a viewer, how do you follow? How do you accept a form in which you have so different parts? Because one is, when you film with private people, it has a totally different focus or emotion or feeling. And then you film journalists at work, again, it has a completely different feeling and focus, and works by information, not by emotion. And so there was still the problem, like, okay, how will we be able in the editing to bring this all together to that it all feels organic as one piece? And for sure, it's something that I tried out in the trailer, in the pitching trailer, when we started to try things out. And then the same thing happened when we switched storyline. So basically, this new minister came in, and I wanted to be inside the system, but didn't get access from the people before him and so forth. And with him, we had the chance that he was from outside politics, and he accepted it. And at that time, for sure, we talked about it, and I knew, like, I've never seen it in a film, like that you change main character in the middle of the film. We have no clue if it will work, but let's go full power into it. Let's film and see later, because my thought was, I emotionally perceive it as an organic thing that happens and am following it in reality, then there must be a way to include it in a narrative, in a cinematic narrative, where the viewer will stay with you. And it took some time in editing to find out how, it was already with Toto, it was a nightmare until I understood how things work, the way you change, how do you change characters in if you have a multi-character storyline, this is a completely different game than following one character. It's like, another kind of filmmaking. And I learned, if I wouldn't have learned a lot about it with Toto and wouldn't have had all the problems in the editing with Toto to find out how that works, then I think I wouldn't have been able to do it in collective. And so, yeah, the editing process was also long, over a year. We started basically after, I don't know, I think we started, organizing the footage and everything, maybe in parallel with the shooting, but maybe during the last months of the shooting. I don't remember yet anymore. But the thing is, to envision a film or reality that you have filmed, to envision it in a film, it's really a different step. And I basically get always in the same situation where I think like, oh, I should have made a break after shooting. I should have just, put everything aside for 4 or 5 months before you go into editing, because it's very hard to, for your mind to process the change from reality to film. Reality and film are two different things.
Yeah. Well, those were really great in-depth thoughts that you shared with us about your creative process with the collective. I think you undertook really maybe risky at first sight, but amazing steps, and this put you really in another level of filmmaking, and also your creative choices put you in the worldwide spotlight, and I guess this was some of the reasons for the fact that you ended up running for the Oscars and was nominated for 2 Oscars even. But of course, we will definitely reach that point. But I want to ask you another question that popped up in the chat, also related with your process of the filming the collective. Did you have any troubles or obstacles by formal institutions for the access or team while shooting collective? How do you communicate with them? Thanks. Can you react to this question?
I mean, the obstacles are always the same with observation documentary, right? How do you get access? How do you get access to laboratories? How do you get access to ministries? How do you... that were basically the obstacles. We were more or less shadowing the work of journalists. So our obstacles were how can we, and also for the journalists, because they were working more or less, and it was harder for them to gain access once they say, there are some people that would like to film what we're doing. And, as we all know in this part of the world, but also in the West, maybe even more, I'm not sure that this kind of film would have been possible in Germany, that anybody would have given us access in Germany. Maybe it's even better in a country like Romania or Bulgaria or, whatever is in the East. But for sure, it was also great that we had such a support from the journalists to follow their work. I mean, although in the beginning they didn't agree and were afraid that we will, come with a big film team, and as they've seen it, and they thought that films are shot with a lot of cameras and a lot of lights. But once they agreed, they were really supporting everything that we wanted to do, which also means, for example, that once I understood that there might be the chance for the first time to really film real life how whistleblowers meet journalists, that was because every step we went further, I became more curious about the next one. Like, okay, so how is it really when whistleblowers meet journalists at night? What are the emotions? Who are these people? Why do they do it? All these questions, and realize, okay, there are 2 or 3 steps to do in order to really get it. And this is, the journalists have to agree and to trust that you don't basically destroy their work. Then the whistleblowers have to agree. And then once it happened, let's say that you're lucky and everybody agreed, how do you make it public? Because you never know if the people still agree once you edited the film to go public with that, to become known as the people who blow the whistle. And luckily enough, so the journalists agreed, then the whistleblowers agreed. We had 5 minutes with them to persuade them into that. And I basically, the deal that we had was, let us film this. And, we are a professional production, so we will keep it under lock, everything we film. And once we've edited it, we can watch the scenes together, and then you can decide if you want to go public, which was a big, for sure, it was a big risk also for the whole production, to edit. First of all, for sure, you invest to film, then you invest to edit for months and months. And then if you're not able to show the film in the form that you think is the best, it's very painful and it's a risk. But luckily enough, these women that were the whistleblowers were all courageous enough to let us
I think this made the film so universal and so important at the moment, having in mind the situation that is happening not only in our part of the world, but everywhere. And I'm sure this was also a very, very important reason for the film to be really so successful and so much discussed about, including also here in Bulgaria and in Sarajevo and everywhere in the world. But let's come to this point. You said that Cinefilm joined you throughout the way, and so you had already also a sales agent, a person that is really dedicated to the outreach of the film to the rest of the world. So then later you had your American partners joining you. How everything happened, and who were your American distributors and partners? Can you talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, so it was very important for us, for sure, to have Filipa and her team on board early. We also, for example, while we were still editing, and because I always, with the whole team, I always work very inclusive. So it's really important for me, for people from the most different part of the world to give us their feedback and to understand how they see the story, for most of all because it was such a Romanian story, right? And so, for example, during the last months of editing, I flew with Bianca to Tel Aviv, and we sat in the office of Cinefil, and they built up the big TV, and we watched together a rough cut. It was still very long. And then we spent a couple of days together and talked about it. And so I think it's very important that the sales agent also is part of, let's say, the heart of the film, that it is their baby as it is, the maker's baby. And then the important thing was Venice. I think Venice for documentaries in Europe is really important, and also some of the most prominent American documentary filmmakers premiere there, from Weissman to Alex Gibney, and, the really great documentaries of the world start there. And then the second very important thing was, so once the thing that Venice accepted us was wonderful, and then TIFF. The fact that Tom Powers took the film at Toronto, that's really the best position you can be in. I think the next best position might be to start your film in Sundance, or, for documentaries. And for sure ITFA, if you have something like ITFA Sundance, it's like, it's as powerful as Venice, Toronto, or maybe even a bit more powerful. It depends on the story you have. And so this double play was great because we started in Venice, we had great press, but more important, an incredible buzz out of Venice. And so we flew, I think the day after the premiere in Venice, we flew to Toronto. And then, we heard the buzz was already good. When we landed in Toronto, there was already great press. And the first screening was okay. But okay. And after the first screening in Toronto, it went crazy. So for the next screening, suddenly, our phones were ringing all the time. Everybody wanted to get to this film, to see this film. We had tickets left. And very important also, alongside Filipa, also Cinetic came on board, and we had great publicists. We had in Venice Claudia Tomasini, then we had in Toronto Ryan Berner from Cinetic, and all these people of the highest quality, basically, they pass on their guarantee for a film. So if they say, like, trust me, you have to see it, then the industry people come. And the second screening in Toronto was really packed with the industry. I mean, from Apple to Magnolia Pictures, and Netflix, everybody was in the room, and the important and the great film critics. And basically, it was in Toronto that Magnolia and Participant decided that they want the film. More distributors decided that they want the film, but after days and or weeks of seeing who would be the best partners, we decided for Magnolia and Participant. But here again, it was for Philippa to teach me how it works. It was the first for me. I didn't know how all this works. So having Philippa to teach me how things work and who is good because of what, and why this story, at a certain point, it was, once Magnolia and Participant decided to do this distribution together, it was very clear for us, it is really not about money anymore. We want these people to work on the film. It doesn't matter who comes with what offer, because it was clear to us this is the dream team for such a film. And it was. As we could see in the whole period that followed, with all the harsh times that came basically with the pandemic that stopped all our plans, right? We had the plans, so you have a release plan in dozens of countries, and suddenly a pandemic hits, and you have a whole dozens of contracts lined up that all have to follow a certain order that was basically negotiated within 3 or 4 months on a daily basis for hours and hours with who goes first and why. And then the pandemic hits, and that meant for Cinephile, for example, that they had to work for months to reshuffle everything and negotiate with everybody when they can air, because you also have your broadcasters, right? So you can only reach that high if you have also the right people around that know how these things work and also react professionally when something like a pandemic hits, and really manage to rearrange basically everything from distribution to campaign, because we also had already a campaign lined up, because we knew we want to run for the Oscars and other awards with Magnolia and Participant and Doc Wolf in the UK and Dulac in France. I think that the most horrible situation is in France, where the film will be distributed only this year in September, because if other countries can go online with the films, in France, we know French people love cinema, they don't watch them online. So it's a catastrophe for the distributors.
Yeah. Well, it's really amazing time we are living in at the moment, but everybody will remember this Oscar ceremony that was so different than anything else. And of course, I've been sitting there and really shouting for you and hoping for you. And I remember you and Bianca sitting at this table that was shown from time to time during this really strange ceremony, so different. And that's why I'm sure everybody will remember it.
Yeah, but super nice. Different, but
yeah, please share with us how it was over there, how is to walk on the red carpet. Just reveal a little bit to us. I'm so proud of you guys.
I can't tell you how it is to walk on the red carpet at the normal Oscars, because it's wild, I guess, at the normal Oscars. Here we were alone. It's like everybody walks alone on the red carpet, and the press is far away. There's a microphone, and the journalist is 10 meters behind the microphone. He shouts to you, and then so it was different. I don't know how it is for the normal Oscars. But I think that Steven Soderbergh and his team really pulled up a really great and intimate, in the end, Oscar ceremony, and it all felt, there was no pressure in a way, you know, it all felt just nice, just good. They had this, you know, in the main area, there was this rotating system so that different categories sit there. Because we were in two categories, we were sitting, I think, very long in this room. And then in there was another area where the teams could, you know, follow on big screens what's happening inside. But it was different, you know, it was basically an Oscar ceremony where you only had a small part of the teams. We also had very restricted tickets. We would have loved to take, for example, our characters, be the journalists or the parents of the victims, you know, all these people that gave us the trust and are part of the story, made this film basically what it is. And that was a bit painful for sure. We only had, I think, 2 tickets plus 1, which, you know, where do you start? Where do you stop? You know, who should come? And that meant also that all films had really only a couple of people there. But that made it intimate, and it was great to meet all the other filmmakers. For sure, many of them were also friends, and we know each other since a longer time. And that was great. I mean, that was really beautiful to be in such an intimate space without all the pressure of a huge, huge event.
Yeah, for sure, we will remember this year because of this really different approach and everything, and because of the collective, because we are so proud of you. But because we have quite little time remaining, I cannot leave you without asking you. And here in the chat we have this such a question. Probably already at the Oscars you were approached by all these platforms and big players asking you what is your next project, or probably you are the one to initiate this kind of already talks about your future projects. Can you tell us a little bit about this? Is the interest towards you growing at the moment? How is it going for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's every year the same. You know, people that are in the spotlight, there's interest coming from different sides, and you start to meet people for sure now a lot via Zoom, and it's great, you know, to meet, you know, the best professionals in the business, and to have these meetings where you discuss, you know, what you're interested in and themes and what they're developing and what you're developing. So that's for sure. I mean, that happens for everybody who is, for sure, even for the people that are shortlisted, you know, people that get into the spotlight. One thing that was new for me, let's say, is how tiring or how strange everything is once you go for months and months and months. And this year it was much longer through the Oscar campaign. It's really taking a lot out of you. It's a daily work over many months, where you really start in the morning to work for Asia, where the film is distributed, till during the night in the US and the whole campaign press. So that really takes a lot of energy. And so right now, I would say after a summer break where I had to recover also a bit, we start to develop, you know, we're writing for a series, and there's another thing that we might start very soon, which is an animation, and then also a feature film. But, you know, it's all in the beginning. It's all, you know, in the development phase. What is for sure also good and important, you know, now, for example, I work with CineLink Media also as my management. It's also great to have, you know, to have a team around you that that are great partners in, seeing what one should board, how one should go about developing the projects, how they could be financed in the broader sense, not only in the European system.
Would you prefer to keep your independency, or would you go, let's say, for a like one platform deal, or how you imagine yourself?
I think that the independency is in the way you are creative, in a way. So maybe it's too early. I didn't make the experience, but I don't see a big problem in boarding a project, let's say, that comes to you already with big producers behind it, because in the end, people that come to you want also your knowledge and creativity, or they want the way you are able to see stories in another way, or be creative in a way that, let's say, somebody who did all the time the same thing is not anymore. So I think independency comes with the way you shape stories, and that's, I guess, also the way you choose even the big producers that come to you, that are open to walk new ground and really understand that you might be the right person to walk this ground with them with a certain story. So it's hard to say, but for sure, I mean, most of the things are things that I generate, or that somebody comes with an idea to me, and then I partner with them and see it really as it could be my next film, or it could really be a story that I think there's always the question of what is the story, or what is the project that, because you will have to spend the next years with, will give me the most interesting life experience and pleasure. I think that's for me, that's the point where I think, like, okay, is this something that, who will I grow once I do this thing? Is it something that triggers me so much that I really want to dive into it for the next years?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you, and I really wish you can spend your next years with something you really like to happen and you really love. Yeah. Otherwise, all the big producers and platforms, I think it would be an honor for them to work with such a great filmmakers as you. We have to wrap up because our time is up. I really thank you so very much to joining us at CineLink Talks. And I will end up with these wonderful words in the chat given by Albena Puneva, who is my compatriot, obviously, which says, by all my heart as Bulgarian citizen, I envy you for your Romanian journalist and health minister. And it is thanks to your movie and courage. So thank you very much, Alex. And we are looking forward to your next films.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.